Aloha, this is Dr. Albert Lin, the traveling doctor, and this is my COVID-19 weekly podcast. I'm going to do things a little differently today and speak, first of all, about this, obviously, this Plandemic controversy, the documentary. And then I'm going to have a separate podcast about all the other things, my antibody tests, the drugs. It's been a really, really busy week. I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to be watching this. So, Plandemic, first of all, again, I have to sort of state my qualifications because I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this. And I already have people who say I'm a fake doctor already. So again, I'm Dr. Albert Lin. I was educated at Stanford University. I went to NYU for medical school, where I trained in internal medicine. I got my residency in internal medicine at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. I've been board certified twice, or recertified once, and certified once initially in internal medicine. And I've been a practicing hospitalist doctor on the state of Hawaii and Oahu for over 14 years. I've seen many patients with influenza and pneumonia. I've helped run many ICUs. I've taken care of many intubated patients. So those are my qualifications. I'm happy to send copies of all my diplomas to you guys because, again, I've been accused lately of being a fake doctor, believe it or not. Also, for disclaimer purposes, you can read my disclaimer, but I want to reiterate that these are my personal opinions, and please do your own due diligence, and we'll talk a little bit about this Plandemic controversy. Yeah, and sorry about my hair. I just spent some time sunbathing, doing it socially distant that way. So let me go into this Plandemic controversy and documentary, and feel free to send this to all of your friends and family. I'm going to make this public. So this controversy, because I want to hear that, you know, maybe we're doing well, and there are a lot of people that are not wanting to hear that we need to stay in place and shelter in place longer. And that, so I understand the dilemma about wanting to have more, I guess, information about this, and maybe even thinking, did we have to do all of this? You know, is the controversy around vaccines, is that an important one to think about? And so Plandemic, if you haven't heard about it, is this video on YouTube, or now off of YouTube. It's been taken off multiple times. Same thing on Vimeo and taken off the internet. And it follows Dr. Judy Mikovits. And I say doctor in that she's a scientist and a PhD. She's not a medical doctor. She is not a DO. She hasn't taken care of any patients in the hospital. She doesn't take care of intubated patients. She hasn't seen that. She just has studied it in a lab. And it goes over Judy Mikovits, Dr. Judy Mikovits, and, you know, revolves around this whole conspiracy about, first of all, saying that she was started, she was, I guess, pegged and kind of down by Dr. Fauci and the group for some research and accused falsely. So these are sort of the facts about it. She was doing research about a virus, and she was working for a separate organization, WPI, researching this virus's effect on chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, which again is really debatable about how much of her results were actually right. She published an article in Science magazine in 2009, and then she was discredited. She couldn't replicate the results. They couldn't replicate the results, and they found that she in fact fudged her data. So she was fired. And then she was basically arrested when she tried to take a lot of that data out of the lab. And when you do research for a lab, you cannot just take data out. You can't take computers out. It's like working for Apple or Google. And again, these are not great examples because I know a lot of you are anti-corporation, but you cannot, when you sign that you're not going to take stuff out, you can't take it out when you're fired. You can't just take it out and give it to other people and use your own research that way. You sign agreements on that. So some of you find that suspect and may still have a conspiracy that she was only targeted because she was trying to speak truth against vaccines. So let me go in through another couple of her, things that she talks about, which is number one of the earliest things she says is that there are no vaccines for any RNA viruses that work. And that's just really false. There are a few vaccines that are against RNA viruses. And, those include polio, hepatitis, measles. Her retracted paper was not about vaccines at all, even though she says it was. And she makes all these claims that like Ebola could not infect humans until, we made it so that way. Again, the problem with all of this is that, she's using her credentials as a scientist to make these claims. And if you look at the Plandemic documentary, there are no references given. It sort of cuts between her and a bunch of different doctors, a lot of whom I've discredited and other sources have discredited, like Dr. Erickson, the doctor who made all those bad statistics and said, a lot more people have this and it's a conspiracy. He's been, again, debunked by the ACEP of the Organization for Emergency Physicians. Completely wrong. They also cut with like fuzzy videos of this guy who looks like a doctor, the guy in the black scrubs. He's not a doctor. He's a chiropractor. His name is Neil, I think, Caputi, C-A-P-U-T-E, or C-A-F-U-T-E. Anyway, he's one of those doctors that says hydroxychloroquine was going to cure everything and that you could drink liters and liters of tonic water. In fact, you would have to drink 12 liters of quinine or 12 liters of tonic to get the amount of quinine he wants to fight, coronavirus and COVID-19. And so she references, or really the documentary references these doctors that have been completely disproven. Not only that, and welcome to Serpentina Sunshine coming. I gotta say that, if you see the book that she writes, and they flash very quickly to the book, and I don't remember the title, but the book that Dr. Judy Mikovits writes has a foreword by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And if that name sounds familiar, it should, because he's a member of the Kennedy family. He is the son of RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, who was assassinated, and he is a big, big anti-vaccine proponent, and he spent all the time, all of his power, and all of his money on fighting vaccines. So there's a documentary when she says, I'm not an anti-vaccine person. And it sounds very convincing, but she has a foreword from the leading anti-vaccine celebrity, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. If you don't believe me, you can go ahead and look this up and go ahead and Google this, okay? So I am not making that up at all. She now, instead, since she's not a legitimate scientist anymore, she is making all these crazy claims. She's claiming that vitamins and vitamin infusions will work, that all these different claims about that masks get you sick, that vitamin D and going outside are going to cure you from all these things. She makes all these wild accusations, and she is a spokesperson for the anti-vaccine community. And again, you can Google and look this up. She gives no documentation in any of her video, anything at the end, and she doesn't know who these doctors are. So I'm telling you them. There's Dr. Erickson. There's it's not even a doctor, or a chiropractor, Caputi. And I will put all the references to these in my own both YouTube channel and Facebook feed. So some more things that she insinuates. She has this idea that like this virus was basically made in a lab by Dr. Fauci, and there's no way that it could have made these mutations to be that infective, and it must have been made by a lab and made with bats somehow, and made infective to specifically infect people. That's basically what she implies, if not outright directly claims. And she says that this is how Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates are all going to get rich. Again, it doesn't make sense because Bill Gates has given away almost all, if not all of his wealth, I think. So he has no motivation unless you think he's just a megalomaniac and wants to control the world. And Fauci, again, his idea about this patent, it's just also false. Again, he's not standing to make a lot of money from any of this. You know, there's not a lot of money in this, in vaccines. You're trying to do it to save humanity. Again, it is true. I will say there's a couple things that are true. The NIAID did offer like $3.7 million, and I've talked about this on my podcast, to study coronavirus in labs like Wuhan, but also a lot of other different labs, not just the Wuhan lab. And again, just because you study and fund it in the lab doesn't mean that you caused it and you had a problem, you know, creating this disease. It means that you're studying it in the areas where there's a big problem. And again, China has had problems with the swine flu, with SARS. And why would you not study it in these areas? Same like the MERS virus, you know, the Middle Eastern respiratory syncytial virus. It was also a virus that was big, and you'd study it in those labs too. You know, one other claim that she makes is that if you look at someone who is a lung patient, like a bad COPD lung patient who's really sick, and if you looked at those lungs in a COVID-19 patient lungs, they'd be the same. That's, again, really pretty much garbage. If you talk to any doctor and you look at the autopsies with ARDS, it basically causes a cytokine storm that obliterates the lungs, okay? So it causes this picture where, you know, you don't, a COPD lung either looks very emphysematous and like you have very open lungs that are baggy, those are like smokers' lungs, or other fibrotic, really kind of, you know, those sort of that structure of lung, and it has nothing to do with inflammation or inflammation like ARDS that you see in COVID-19 patients that need to be intubated, you know? And so, you know, that is really just completely out of context, and she doesn't know that because she's never taken care of COVID-19 patients and she's never taken care of COPD patients. Another thing she says is that, you know, somehow doctors are being incentivized to put COVID-19 on the death certificate and, you know, to create reasons to have more billing. And yes, has that been something that states have done differently? Or some of the New York City hospitals have put in COVID-19 as a diagnosis or done it when there's not total proof about that. It's been done because it's overwhelmed. They've had many people die. You've heard about those studies, or not studies, that document the stories that documented that patients dying left and right. They're in refrigerated trucks. They have clearly died of other things and COVID-19. And so, you know, that has happened. And yes, hospitals will get paid a little bit more for COVID-19 diagnosis. But again, a patient with COVID-19 is very, very sick. They're intubated. They're sometimes for weeks. They're in an ICU. They're isolated. They have different people come in and out to see them. Your average ICU patient, it costs a lot of money, and they get paid more money if you're on a ventilator. It's just common sense because it costs a lot of money to take care of those patients. And you know, it's clear also when I've signed a lot of death certificates, and when people sign death certificates are signed not just one cause of death sometimes. I mean, people don't just die of a heart attack, as I've mentioned in the last podcast, or just die of a stroke, or just die of kidney failure, or just die of sepsis all the time. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes it's a combination of things. So you will put COVID-19 if they've had COVID-19. And then they have ARDS or have sepsis or fail. And it's as a result of this and as a result of that. That's why you would put COVID-19 on a death certificate sometimes. So can you say 1000% that this, you know, this diagnosis of COVID-19 is what killed them 100%? No, of course you can't absolutely say that. But if they present like this, you can say it like this. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and, you know, swims like a duck, then it is a duck. You know, as a doctor, if I see a patient that has complete kidney failure, hepatic failure, has those clots you hear of, and they have COVID-19, am I going to say that they died of just clots? That's how they died? That was a thing. Why did they get clots? Because of COVID-19. They'd never had clots before. Why did they have ARDS and end up on the ventilator? People don't just suddenly have their lungs fail and flood up and have hypoxia just out of the blue, or just because of diabetes or even lung disease. They don't. They have it from somewhere. So the doctor has to make their educated guess. And that's why they put it on the death certificate. And yes, the billing does pay them more. I think she said something like $13,000. And again, the doctor doesn't get that. It makes it sound like the doctors are incentivized to do it because they get the money. They don't. Most doctors are not paid that way. They are paid usually through the hospital, through a salary. I mean, some are a little different and they can charge for a critical care note if they're an intensive care doctor, but they'll get charged. They will basically bill the same way. They bill for procedures and for one type of note. They don't bill for a specific diagnosis. That helps the hospital get money. So she makes it sound like it's the hospital's fault they get money for taking care of a sick patient just because that sick patient is COVID-19. They would get money even if they were intubated and intubated for pneumonia. They would get a lot of money. They would get that money because it costs a lot of money. So that's why, okay? And okay, so that goes about the billing. Here's another thing. So she also mentions that, you know, I focus on that billing because I don't think people realize how expensive it is to take care of an ICU level patient who's intubated, who needs isolation, who has their kidneys failing, who's being treated for clots. If you think it's cheap, if you think it's $100, $200, even $1,000 to take care of a patient like that, you have no idea what you're talking about. It costs thousands of dollars. So I'm not trying to say, oh, because it costs that amount of money, we bill for COVID-19. I mean, but she makes all these leaps and assumptions that people are doing it to make money, that hospitals are doing it to make money. We're doing it because we have to document it. If we don't document what we're treating them for, insurance, Medicare, other insurance companies can flat out deny us. We have to show the proof. And we show that proof in our notes, our daily notes, also to help prevent, you know, lawsuits against the hospital, because you can't just say you took care of a COVID-19 patient. You have to show the documentation, and it's all documented. We can't share all that to you because this is patient privacy. It's HIPAA. And so this is how we do it. Also, going into hydroxychloroquine, and I've talked about, everyone knows in my other podcasts, which you can reference, I've talked about hydroxychloroquine for weeks on all my other podcasts. Initially, the data was good and it looked good, but all those studies from France were done in vitro, not in vivo. And a lot of those new studies have shown, and one even today I heard about in the news, again, I can reference it later, that hydroxychloroquine has not been shown to be useful for intubated patients or to prevent death or to prevent time on ventilator. So there may still be a role for the early patient, the less sick patient. But again, there hasn't been data that's shown that it's been really useful. And so, yeah, Trump tried to publicize it. I'm not saying that's why it's not useful. The data, the strict data and the reviews and the studies don't show that hydroxychloroquine has a huge in vivo effect, meaning for patients, not just in a lab. If you look at the original studies from France, they did not show much of an effect. And it was only for mouse models or grown in a petri dish or something, and it only showed that there was decreased level of virus, not that it made patients healthier. You can look this up. It's clear that that's what's going on. So I have talked to a couple friends. Is hydroxychloroquine still being used? Yes, hydroxychloroquine is being used off-label, even by some other doctors and doctor friends I know, because they don't have a lot of other stuff to use. So they use it, and it may still be useful for the more milder patient. But assume that there's a conspiracy against hydroxychloroquine, that's really kind of lousy. Some of the studies were not randomized control studies. They weren't done in humans, and they excluded patients who died from analysis. So those are really bad studies. I mean, again, we need more studies. But again, the big one that came out shows that hydroxychloroquine is not very useful for the very sick patients. But maybe there may be a role for earlier patients. I'm not saying that there's no role for hydroxychloroquine, just the data doesn't show that. And she sort of implies that now there's a shortage because there's reduced production, and somehow the pharmaceutical companies are shutting down production of this drug. There's not a lot of money in that drug, first of all. So the shortages, possibly, can you think of an alternative reason why there's a hydroxychloroquine shortage? Not because companies are shutting it down, but because every hospital all over the entire world is trying to get this drug right now. America even tried to get some from India that Trump was able to get from Prime Minister Modi. And every doctor, unfortunately, some not so, scrupulous doctors, or some doctors that weren't very ethical, were prescribing for patients or themselves or own family members to hoard. So pharmacies, hospitals, other ones have been hoarding this medicine. And that's why there's a shortage. There's not because we don't want to use it. It's because in the beginning, we couldn't get it fast enough. Just like there's a PPE shortage. If there's a PPE shortage or a hand sanitizer shortage in medical places and in Costco, are you going to automatically assume that there is a conspiracy to not make PPE or a conspiracy to not make hand sanitizer? No, you would never ever think that. That is kind of garbage. And she also makes this claim that flu vaccines all contain coronaviruses. I don't know how much I can roll my eyes on that one. Again, it sounds like it's something easy to say. Please show it. I don't know a single study or single legitimate data or study or a journal that you can reference and shows that there is coronavirus in those flu vaccines that we get annually. That's the biggest clickbait scaremongering tactic ever. How can you just say that? Show me that there are coronaviruses in the flu vaccines. Now, again, one of the other things I want to sort of talk about in relation to this video, again, this Plandemic video that Judy, I think it's Mikovits, is sort of trying to say is a reason why we have to end all of this hoopla over waiting for the vaccine and sheltering in place. She says sheltering in place, using masks, all these somehow damage your immune system. That the best way is to roll around with the microbes, and there's stuff in the sand and ocean that will heal you and keep you from getting sick. Now, I am still a believer. I'm not saying it's a binary thing that you completely stay indoors all day. I mean, I think you can still go out with a mask, that you should still do whatever exercise is allowed, still walk, still get vitamin D. Yes, there's a role for vitamin D and vitamin C in these things. And if we don't get it, we do supplement it with our food or with our supplements or with, multivitamins. But does that protect you from getting the flu or getting the COVID-19 infection? Her allegation, what she's implying is that if you just go out and you don't wear a mask and you don't do whatever, that you will not get the flu, that you will not get COVID-19, and that sheltering in place is what's causing us to get this. Again, all the people in China, all the people in Italy that were getting it before, they're doing that already. Do you think the people that were getting sick and dying and rushed to the ambulance were in those situations where they weren't going outside and they were using masks and sheltering in place already, and those are the only people that were getting sick? That's absolutely false. They weren't. They were living their normal life. So how can you say that all those people got sick that way? That they, when they were already out and they were already doing all that, maybe that they were getting it from the flu vaccine. Now, again, it's hard because she's a scientist. I'm not saying she's not a real scientist or doesn't know something about the scientific method, and she is a PhD. So one time she was legitimate about this. But just like Dr. Erickson's video from Bakersfield and all these other doctors that she does a flash kind of a flyby in her Plandemic video about, they don't mention who they are. They don't give any references. They don't tell you how much all of these doctors have been discredited, and it looks fancy. There's very good camera work, and this documentarian, Mickey Willis, I've looked him up. He's like a model actor guy. He's not in the big anti-vaccine movement, but again, this thing is going literally viral. I see a lot of corollaries between how people are actually treating COVID-19 and this documentary. I mean, you cannot win. If the video gets taken down, then the argument everyone makes is, oh, because it's taken down, it must be speaking the truth. It must be conspiracy because I can't watch it. That's what's being assumed right now. And that's just quite honestly false. It's not being taken down because it's false, because it's completely true. It's being taken down because it's false. It's because she's saying that if you don't wear a mask and you just go outside, that it's healthy and it's fine. It's not healthy and it's not fine, and that is immediately dangerous. And that's why YouTube and Facebook is taking it down, because it's like saying, go and jump off a bridge with everyone else because it won't hurt you. it will hurt you. If someone in power, again, says that that you can just go out and jump off a bridge because you won't die, it's obviously something that will hurt you. Now, again, you can believe me or not believe me, and you can believe in vaccines or you can't believe in vaccines. I'm actually, I'm at the point where I'm this way. We can wait for a vaccine, and a lot of us will get the vaccine, okay? And all of you that don't believe in vaccines and don't think that it's legit or that it's trying to inject you with something or that it causes autism or is injecting you with coronavirus and is not the cure but the disease, and that think that Fauci and Bill Gates are going to get money from this or power, don't get the vaccine. I'm not going to force you to get the vaccine. And in America, I doubt that you're going to be able to be forced to get the vaccine. I mean, maybe other countries you may have to get it. I don't know. You may also get limited. Your freedoms may get limited. You may not be able to travel out of an airport without proof of vaccine, or again, you might have to take an antibody test at least, or a PCR test. So I don't know. I mean, no one's forcing you to get the vaccine. If you really don't want to get the vaccine, don't get it. I'm not going to make you get it. No one can force you to get it. No one can put a gun to your head and make you get it. So don't get it. You are then assuming all the risk for yourself, your family, and your friends that you won't get COVID-19. And then maybe you'll say, oh, well, maybe I still get, so then I'll get sick and then I'll go to the hospital. Then that's just really, really arrogant and really, really presumptuous and very selfish for society if you're getting it that way, okay? And living life that way. So if you don't want the virus and you don't want the vaccine, then don't get the vaccine. It's very, very simple. So I'm here to just debunk Plandemic. And again, I sort of went already over what I've been doing. So I'm going to shut this down right now and go on to the rest of my podcast, which you're welcome to join me for. And again, I am Dr. Albert Lin, the traveling doctor. I will save this video on YouTube. I'll make it shareable on YouTube and on Facebook. Again, these represent my opinions as a doctor who's practiced for 14 years. Again, I'm Stanford educated for school with my biology degree. I went to NYU for medical school. I went to Cedars-Sinai for my internal medicine residency, and I'm board certified in internal medicine. And so those are my credentials. I've taken care of many ICU patients, many patients with flu and pneumonia, hundreds, if not thousands of these patients after 14 years. And so these are my qualifications. I hope this helps answer some of your questions. Please feel free to forward this to your friends and family. And I'll be happy to answer the other questions and go into more stuff after this, okay? Thanks a lot, guys. Stay safe. Mahalo, aloha, and we will, again, get through this eventually. It's no easy way to do it, okay? Stay safe, guys.